Look what your friend considers a wedding present.
Why, it's a model of the true love.
The what?
A boat he designed and built, practically. We sailed it down the coast of Maine, and back the summer we were married. My, she was yar.
Yar? What does that mean?
It means, what does it mean? Easy to handle, quick to the helm, fast, bright. Everything a boat should be. Until she develops dry rot.
Good job. Good job. Katherine Hepburn is just incredible. Incredible.
I should be cast in The Aviator.
Aviator 2. Still Aviator.
Aviator 2. But it's really just a documentary or a biopic of Katherine Hepburn, but it's called Aviator 2.
Aviator 2 for no reason.
Right. That'd be awesome. Welcome to Your Pick, a film podcast. I'm Tatum.
And I'm Geneva.
We're two friends who love movies and love sharing them with each other. Each week, we take turns picking a film that is close to our hearts and talk about why it moves us, to tears, to laughter, and everything in between. We celebrate the craft of filmmaking, as well as the unique and personal ways we find meaning in the movies we watch. Okay, Geneva, welcome back.
Thank you. Welcome back yourself.
It's been a rough week, so I'm a little bit low energy this week, but I'm going to try and rally, because what better to make you happy than just diving into family drama that is not your own?
Agreed.
But before we jump into today's film, can you just start by sharing with us real quick what you've been watching?
Yes. Let me see. So I watched several recent movies and then several not recent movies. So the not recent movies that I saw, first I watched Death Becomes Her, because my brother and I went to see it on Broadway. It is officially opening later this November, but we went to see it in previews. Fantastic show. Had a great time. The movie I had never seen before. It's from 1992, directed by Robert Zemeckis. It stars Meryl Streep and Goldie Hawn and Bruce Willis. And it's a sort of campy comedy with a strong, fantasy special effects element. It's a very weird movie. I don't know if you, Tatum, have you ever seen it? I mean, it's sort of a queer classic. It's very much a cult classic and has been kind of reclaimed by the, particularly the lesbian audience. But it's really, really fun. Meryl Streep in particular is absolutely fantastic. At the time, people thought she couldn't do comedy, and that's insane because she can do everything. But yeah, it was very interesting to compare it to the stage show, because they do kind of clean up certain elements, not in the sense of like something was raunchy and they made it cleaner, because they kind of did the opposite, but like in the sense of they made the story structurally a little bit tighter and they focus more on the relationship between the two women. But yeah, I definitely enjoyed the movie for what it is. Anyway, yeah, sorry, Tatum, have you actually seen Death Becomes Her?
No, I have not seen it, but it obviously really is a lot. There's a lot of talk about it right now because of the substance that came out, and a lot of people are like, oh, this movie was made before. And people are drawing comparisons between the two, but I have not seen Death Becomes Her.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, it would be a very interesting pairing with the substance. Let's see, what else did I see? I saw a movie from a drama from the late 80s called A Handful of Dust, which is an adaptation of an Evelyn Waugh novel. And, you know, it's British, like 1930s drama about infidelity and, class, and it was fine. It wasn't super memorable, except that the ending is very unexpectedly bleak. The main character, who's like essentially a pretty nice, if not the brightest guy, essentially ends up in some sort of like hellish, doomed to all eternity in a situation that is really miserable for him for no fault of his own. And wasn't quite what I needed at that moment. So as soon as I finished watching that, I then went and watched a classic that I had never seen before called Holiday with Cary Grant and Katherine Hepburn. Speaking of Philadelphia Story. And that movie is an absolute delight. It is a comedy, although it's a little less screwballish than I was expecting. But it's a 1930s comedy about a working class guy who gets engaged to an upper class woman. But then it turns out that she's not right for him. And actually her black sheep of the family sister, played by Katherine Hepburn, is much more right for him. But it's just very, very charming, very sparkly. Great comfort watch. Katherine Hepburn gives a really wonderful performance as this woman who has just this really independent spirit and has been boxed in by her family all her life. And Cary Grant's character arriving and their kind of instant connection is all of a sudden this ray of hope for her to get something better out of life. And I really enjoyed it. So would avoid A Handful of Dust if you're not in a great mood. But I would recommend The Holiday.
Oh, it looks like Holiday was the last movie she made immediately before The Philadelphia Story.
Oh, interesting.
So she did 3 movies in a row with Cary Grant. It was Bringing Up Baby, then Holiday, then Philadelphia Story. Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, they're such an iconic pairing. But I feel like so much of that iconicness comes from those 3 movies. I mean, Bringing Up Baby is also an all-time classic, and then Holiday is the one that I hadn't seen before. But they're just their chemistry is really undeniable together. Yeah. So, and then of the more recent movies that I've seen, I'm not going to go into these too much because we'll probably talk about them at some point in future Oscar-related podcasts. But I saw Conclave, I saw Anora, and I saw Juror Number 2. All 3 of those I really liked in different ways. Would be interested in rewatching all 3 of them. I was thinking of rewatching Conclave earlier this week because I felt like I needed a bit of a pick-me-up, and it is kind of a fun movie in a weird way. Didn't get around to it, but I'll probably get around to it at some point. But anyway, that's what I've been watching. How about you?
Wow, you went through that really quick.
Thank you. I don't know if that's a compliment. I should probably get more articulate about these things.
No, you're fine. Geneva, it's been a week. It's okay.
It has been.
Oh boy. Okay, so since our last episode, I've watched a few things. A lot of them no. 2 of them were just really fun movies to watch, and then the other ones were things that just have been on my list for a while. So the first one that I watched was Kubo and the Two Strings. It is a stop motion animation film from 2016. I remember when it came out, there was just a lot of talk about it because the animation was supposedly very innovative and cool, and the storyline and all of those things. But I just never got around to it until now. I was incredibly disappointed by this movie. I don't know if I went in with too high of expectations, but it was a movie where, I mean, yes, the animation is absolutely incredible. Stop motion animation will always be an achievement to me that is astounding. It's just the time and dedication that goes into making stop motion anything it blows my mind. But this movie, in terms of the story, I just did not think it was very well done because it is very much so a fantasy. It's in this fantasy world that has kind of like ghosts and magical powers and all of those things, which is something that I really love. But this movie does not do a good job of explaining the rules of how these powers work, how they interact with each other, why it's helpful, why it's not. It's called Kubo and the Two Strings, and he plays this little, I'm not going to call it a guitar. It's not a guitar, but like a stringed instrument that has 2 strings on it. But like, where did the power really come from? What does it actually do? Which they allude to kind of what it is, but it's not really clearly explicitly stated how all of this comes together. It was also kind of creepy in certain ways because there's 2 characters that are like, like his two spirit guide things, they kind of like have this awkward interaction with each other where they're flirting, and it can be really uncomfortable, and like you don't know why it's happening. So aside from the fact that this movie came out in 2016 and it was a lot more common back then, which is sad, less than 10 years ago, to have Caucasian people voicing Asian characters, which is what this movie does. But putting that aside, I just was very disappointed in the storyline of this. I didn't think it was well written. I don't think the world and its rules were established very well, which if you don't understand the magic of a magical story, then I don't know. I just feel like that means it's not done well. I'm aware I'm in the minority. A lot of people love this movie, but for me, I was not blown away by it. The next movie I watched, I caught it on TV. It just happened to be playing. It is the 1997 John Woo film Face Off, starring Nicolas Cage and John Travolta. This is a movie that I have been wanting to see ever since my brain started to understand the legacy of what Nicolas Cage is as an actor in the film industry. I feel like people always talk about Face Off and Ghost Rider, neither of which I had seen up until this point. Face Off is a wild ride, let me tell you. It is something where actually like it's very similar to Speed, which we just talked about, in the sense that like the concept, I think, is actually really, really interesting. It's a little bit of a simple concept, but it like creates this idea of, wow, how would that even work? How would that break down if this situation actually happened in the real world? It's such a great concept. Oh my gosh, this movie's insane. Like, Nicolas Cage and John Travolta are both going crazy. Nicolas Cage in particular. But like the fact that Nicolas Cage is playing his character, but then his face gets switched, and then he's playing John Travolta's character, but within his bot, like it's a crazy swap, and a lot of drama ensues, and just like the concept of a criminal being locked up in prison, but the person who's the criminal is actually not the criminal because he switched fate. Like, it's wild. So anyway, if you want, it's definitely, I would say it's definitely too long. It's over 2 hours. It does not need to be that long. But if you just want to like put something on that has a really cool idea and is just executed in a way that's very over the top and ridiculous, I would highly recommend Face Off. So I enjoyed it. I would like to watch it again at some point, but anyway, it was a good time. That's Face Off. And then the next movie I watched is a film that I have not seen since high school. I watched Jennifer's Body with a friend, which is a 2009 cult classic film that in 2009 was marketed towards horny teenage boys, which is hilarious because that is like the last person that this movie is intended for. It is not intended for horny straight teenage boys at all. Like, not at all. This movie is very, very queer coded. It's a lesbian movie. This film is about lesbians. That's what it is. But it's just iconic. There's so many great lines, but also it's really dumb. Like, it's really bad. It's a bad movie. Like, it's not, you just have to kind of put a lot of logic to the side and just let it be. And when you do that, you really can appreciate it, because there are some lines that Megan Fox's character Jennifer delivers in this movie that are like, where did that come from? Like, very dated one-liners from out of nowhere. Like, it's not a good movie. It's not a good movie, but it's still really fun to watch. And it's definitely become a cult classic, and I wish that more people would watch it because it's just a dumb little Halloween horror movie that, I don't know, has some cool sapphicness to it. So that's Jennifer's Body. And then I also watched Anora, like Geneva mentioned. Her and I talked about it outside of this podcast. Her and I both have different relationships with it. It was a lot more stressful for me than I think for most people, just because the concept of the movie, I will say, Geneva, I don't know if you agree with me on this. I feel like Anora was falsely advertised. I feel like it was advertised as this like Cinderella story romance sort of thing. And then I got into it, and that's kind of how it started out. And then all of a sudden it gets super, super stressful. And it's like people running around the city trying to solve problems, and there's a timeline, and people are yelling and screaming, and there's like, I don't think the movie was advertised as that. And so it was just a bit much for me going in.
I mean, when I saw the trailer, my memory of the trailer is that it has the Cinderella story elements, but it also lets you know that at some point there's going to be a turn, and there are going to be problems that result from their relationship. So when I was watching it, I actually thought it took a lot longer for the problems to start kicking in than I thought it would. I actually was surprised by how much of the first portion of the movie is just the like a montage of the Cinderella story. Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, that probably also affected the way that I was watching it versus you, or I was more anticipating, okay, at some point things are going to start going down. And then when they started, I was like, okay, this is to be expected. So that makes some sense.
Yeah, I just thought the main conflict based off of the trailer was just going to be like their parents being like, you guys are too young, don't get married. And they're like, but we can decide for ourselves that we want to get married regardless of our age. Like, I thought that that's what it was going to be.
23 years old, you're too young to get married.
It's very mildly that. It's a lot. When you watch the movie, anyway, I'm not going to get super into that. I will say it's a movie that there's a lot to appreciate about it. It was not for me in the sense that, like, it was very, very stressful in a way that is very specific to me and life experiences that I have. But there's a lot to appreciate about it. So that is Anora. And then the last thing that I watched a few days ago. It's called Anaïs in Love. It is a French movie that came out in 2021. And I actually want to read 2 Letterboxd reviews of this because it basically summarizes what the movie is. So the first one is it's written by a person on Letterboxd whose name is Aurora, and they said, if the worst person in the world and Frances Ha had a gay French cousin. And then the second review is alternate title, Portrait of Call Me by the Worst Person on Fire. So it's basically like, I enjoyed the movie, but the way that I summarized it is like it's doing a lot of things that feels like a replica of what superior films before it have already done. It follows this young woman who's French, and she's kind of running around chaotically, kind of irresponsible, flying by the seat of her pants. And she's like, she has this boyfriend, but then she breaks up with him, and then she starts this affair with this married man, and then she like becomes fascinated with his wife, who's this author who's off in a cottage somewhere. And then she's like, oh, well, now I'm obsessed with this woman. And then she goes and meets this woman at a cottage, and then they end up having a romance. And it's just very like, it's beautifully shot. It's a nice reflection on like being young and figuring out who you are, what you want, how to be responsible. Like, is falling in love reckless? What does that even mean? Like, do you want stability? Do you not want stability? So the concept of it is very good. I would say it's well written and it's well executed. It's just a lot of other movies have already done it, which is unfortunate because I think it would be appreciated a lot more if I hadn't seen this before in Call Me By Your Name, Frances Ha, the worst person in the world, and Portrait of a Lady on Fire. So, yeah.
What I'm hearing from you is that we really need to finally do our episode on the worst person in the world.
Oh, man. Oh, it's... Geneva, seeing as how you and I are both not necessarily in the best place right now, I don't know if I want to dive into the worst person in the world.
You know what? Fair enough. Pinned for the future.
But someday we will talk about it.
Someday, yeah.
Yeah, that movie's incredible. So Anaïs in Love, I would recommend it, but only after you have already seen Call Me By Your Name, Frances Ha, Worst Person in the World, and Portrait of a Lady on Fire. Watch all of those first and then watch this one. But yeah, those are the movies I've been watching. I've also been rewatching The Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt, which
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I remember when the show first came out, I loved it. And then I think it was like by season 3, I just didn't really watch it anymore because I think that was when it kind of started going a little bit downhill. But it's really just like a colorful, bright, innocent, happy TV show that makes you laugh. And when it's not making you laugh, it makes you feel happy. So it's been a great thing for me to watch right now. I'm enjoying it. But unfortunately, I'm already almost done with season 2. So I'm like, well, what am I going to do after this? I don't know. I have to find another happy, pleasant show to watch, which is fine. But yeah. So Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt, Titus Andromedon, legend.
Legend. Pinot Noir.
Pinot Noir, an ode to black penis.
I only ever saw the first season
goodness.
of Kimmy Schmidt. I feel like it got kind of mixed responses the longer it went on, so I just never bothered to watch the rest of it. But that first season is pretty excellent.
It's so good, yeah. Not to mention, I mean, we all know it's one of the most enjoyable television TV show theme songs of all time. It's so good. Like, I never ever skip the theme song at the beginning. It's just so fun to sing. But anyway, all right, can we go ahead and jump into our discussion?
Yes, let's do it.
Okie doke. So today on the show, we will be discussing George Cukor's 1940 film adaptation of the stage play, The Philadelphia Story, starring Katherine Hepburn, Jimmy Stewart, Cary Grant, John Howard, Ruth Hussey, Mary Nash, and Virginia Wiedler.
Wow.
Yes, what a cast.
What a cast. It's like 3 names that I know and then a whole bunch of names I don't know.
But all of them, in my opinion, very impressive performances.
Yes, all of them fantastic.
Yes. Okay, so with fast-paced dialogue and quick-witted jokes that if you blink, you will miss them, the film tells the story of Tracy Lord, a high-class young woman who on the eve of her wedding comes face-to-face with her ex-husband and a news reporter who was sent to her house to write a riveting story for a gossip magazine called The Spy. As the hours pass, Tracy, who was once quite certain about her new husband-to-be, George, suddenly begins to question her choice and sets out to discover for herself who she wants to be with and ultimately who she wants to be. Not a goddess or a princess, but a human being. So, the rest of this, just to be pretty straightforward, I paraphrased Wikipedia, so don't come for me.
Our old friend Wikipedia.
But yes, so the original Broadway production, which ran for 417 performances, was written by Philip Barry specifically for Katherine Hepburn, who plays Tracy. And she was so dedicated to the project that she invested her own money into the production and also declined a salary. I think she did accept like a portion of the like ticket earnings though. And so she used the play as a means for her to transition back into film and prove that she was no longer box office poison, as many critics had claimed her to be after starring in a slew of films that failed commercially. When her then partner Howard Hughes purchased the rights to the play for her, she proceeded to sell them to MGM's Louis B. Mayer for $250,000. I'm assuming not adjusted for inflation, but I don't know. And the power of final approval for the film's producer, director, screenwriter, and cast. She personally selected George Cukor to direct, who she had worked with on previous films such as A Bill of Divorcement and Little Women, and the roles of her 2 main suitors went to Cary Grant and Jimmy Stewart after Mayer expressed his concerns over Hepburn's box office appeal. So that was kind of the behind-the-scenes research I was able to come up with. But Geneva, I actually wanted to ask you, since you are the film history expert, are there any holes or gaps that you can fill in regarding Katherine Hepburn and her label as box office poison? Not to put you on the spot, I just wasn't sure if you knew anything off the top of your head.
Yeah, I mean, I make no claims to be an expert, but I had heard that about in I believe like 1938 or so, there was an article that appeared in one of the major film magazines. I don't know which one, maybe Variety, maybe something else, but basically this the writer listed a whole slew of stars at that time who were commanding huge salaries because they had previously been huge stars and made a lot of money, but all of their recent films had been bombs. And they basically said, all of these stars are box office poison. Why do studios keep hiring them? they, we need to like get rid of them and make way for new stars, basically. I'm probably this is just off out of memory, but basically Katherine Hepburn was on that list, and that was a huge it was a big dent to her like career and her public reputation, because like you said, her bunch of her films had just failed, and people, from what I know, I think studios had always kind of struggled to know what to do with her, because she has such a distinct vibe. You try and slot her in as a sort of like, stereotypical ingenue or something like that, and she's not going to work. She's Katherine Hepburn. Like, she needs to be her own person. So like the fact that this movie came out, the fact that she was the one who, I believe, am I wrong in thinking that the writer of the original Broadway play actually wrote it for her, like with her in mind?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, he wrote it for her.
So it's such a testament to her taste and her drive that she could recognize what her persona is, what her source of appeal is, what audiences need to see her doing at that moment. Because this whole story is basically like, let's kind of cut Katherine Hepburn down a peg while also reminding everyone why we love her in the first place. Like, she was so smart about how she comes across on screen and what is the right role for her. So yeah, the fact that she was able to get this play written, make it a hit, kind of through the force of her own personality, and then get it made into this movie, cast these other huge stars, and I believe the movie was a huge success, is just like, such an incredible tribute to her talent and the force of her personality, not just as a star, but also as a businesswoman, a producer, a force in Hollywood.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I love that you were saying that kind of the force of her personality is what helped this film be such a hit. And that just made me think about, could anyone else play this role? Like, if anyone else had done this, I don't think this film would have been successful at all.
Well, actually, it's funny that you say that, because not to get ahead of myself a little bit, but part of my relationship with the Philadelphia Story is, for years, I didn't watch it, in part because so there is a musical remake of the Philadelphia Story called High Society from the 50s. I had watched that. I had like caught it on TV or something like that. Grace Kelly plays the Katherine Hepburn part. No disrespect to Grace Kelly, but Katherine Hepburn, she is not. And in my opinion, Tracy Lord is a terrible role for her. I know some people disagree. Some people like High Society. I really do not like it. But it sort of like soured me on the idea of it before I'd ever watched it. And then I finally watched it for a class. I didn't even watch it on my own. I watched it because
wow. Okay.
Yeah, I took an American film comedies class in college, and this was on the list of things for a unit on the comedies of remarriage. This is what we watched. And I just fell in love with it. I was like, this is the greatest thing ever. Why did I ever avoid this? But you're right. It has to be cast right. And Katherine Hepburn really is the only person that you could see pulling it off to the extent that she does.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like, just kind of jumping a little bit more into our typical discussion. So I tried, blah, blah, blah. So when I tried to look up reviews for this film, it was really interesting because all of the reviews that I kept reading didn't really have anything to do with the plot of the film at all. All of the reviews were talking about the performances. And I feel like this is a movie where, I'm not going to say the plot doesn't matter, because it does, but the plot purely feels like an avenue for these actors to just play really funny and interesting characters. Because I just think, as we talk about this movie, I'm just like, I don't know. I just want to kind of dote on James Stewart and Katherine Hepburn. And, I think I've told you this before. I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of Cary Grant as an actor. I think he's more of a icon for what he represents, and as opposed to his actual acting ability, in my own opinion. But watching this, I was like, man, I feel like Jimmy Stewart and Katherine Hepburn are acting circles around him. And maybe that's just because his character is a little bit more, he kind of likes to sit back and just watch everything unfold. He like sets it all up and then watches it happen. But I love the performances in this movie. I thought that John Howard, who plays Kittredge, was very good as well. And obviously Virginia Weidler, who plays Dinah, is I love her so much. Like,
oh my gosh. Absolute icon.
She's fantastic. Like, she's not on screen very much, but whenever she is, you know she's going to say something that's just like absolutely captivating. And I feel
think
like
this
great.
era is a great era for like headstrong little girls on film. Like, because I'm thinking of Meet Me in St. Louis, where her little sister is this like really dark sort of proto-goth who's obsessed with death, but is also adorable and charming. And I don't know, like there's just I love a like great charismatic little girl performance in an old movie. You know, there's nothing like it.
Yeah, I mean, I found it to be so watching this movie, I thought it was interesting how we have several female characters. I would exclude Margaret from this, who's Tracy and Dinah's mom, but I think Tracy, Elizabeth, who's the photographer, and Dinah, all three of them seem to be a little bit more of like non-traditional in terms of how they behave as women in the society. And I just found like the combination of having them be these strong women, but also seeing how they're trying to fit them within this mold of what a traditional story looks like during this time, I found to be fascinating, because they're these headstrong girls, but then they also have to be desiring to be married. And it's just the combination of those two things I found to be fascinating, because part of me is like, I feel like all of these women don't want anything to do with men, but that's not really allowed during this period in Hollywood. So how do they put all these things together? Do you see what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, there's like this movie, like rewatching it, I feel like there's such interesting tensions about it's sort of simultaneously revolutionary and also traditional. Like it, in some ways it's very, you know, kind of reinforcing of the class distinctions, and then in some ways it's like, well, actually they don't matter because we're all just people and we need to judge each other on that basis. And then in some ways, you know, there's that whole speech that her father gives to Tracy about how, you know, you'll never be a first-class woman until you learn to have like understanding of human frailty. The way he says like a first-class woman, I'm paraphrasing, maybe it's slightly other phrase, like it's always kind of stuck out to me, because that is a very, you know, by modern standards, that does seem very, you know, gender normative and very like, well, is this any different than being a first-class man? Like, why do you need to phrase it that way? But then, like you say, this movie also has a variety of incredibly strong, dynamic, independent, interesting female characters, and you know, a variety of them too. Like Liz is very different from Tracy Lord, but they're both real forces of personality. So yeah, I don't really know where I'm going with this, except this movie is like a really interesting set of kind of tensions, contradictions, but like, you know, different ideas living next to each other.
Yeah, I think this was kind of as feminist as Hollywood could get in 1940. And because, you know, we have these mentions of Uncle Willie, for example. I hate Uncle Willie. I think he's trash. Yeah. And I think the movie doesn't hide the fact that he's kind of this sleazebag. I mean, he literally touches his niece's ass. Like he's very gross. And I feel like the movie, and you know, the father too, they're kind of commenting on how he went off and left his wife, and you know, they're still married, but he's like, men need to have a young woman in order for them to feel young. It's only natural. La, 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 la.
It's kind of your fault that I had an affair when you really think about it.
Right. And it's like, I think the film really tries to show that like women need to be free of this sort of mentality, and men can be very selfish in how they interact with women and how they don't think about women, or how they do think about women, or whatever. But then they also have to fit women into this mold of being married at the same time. And so, yeah, I mean, we see this back and forth with Katherine, I think with a lot of people in this film, who kind of dote upon her and treat her like this goddess, as the movie says all the time. And at some points she finds it empowering, or I think at some points the movie tries to portray that as empowering. But then at other times, the film tries to portray it as demeaning, and like you're not seeing her full depth, and you're telling her to be something that she's not, or you're creating her as this false angel rather than seeing her who she really is. And I don't know. I mean, obviously, I love this movie. I chose it. I love the script. I think it's one of the best scripts I've seen and adapted to screen. But at the same time, I do feel like the script is struggling with this back and forth of how do we be feminist within a cultural context where women are still very domesticated and, you know, get married and have kids and all of those things. So, yeah.
Can I ask, before we get too far, how did you come to first see this movie, and kind of what's your relationship to it? Like, you know, what are sort of the things that first drew you to it that made you want to pick it?
Yeah, thank you for asking. I forgot about that. I actually don't know the answer to that question. All I remember is that it's a movie that was on my list for a while, and that at one point I just watched it. Like I saw it for the first time sometime within the last like 5-6 years, I think. So I didn't see it until I was in my, you know, mid-20s. But aside from that, I don't really remember. I just wanted to see it, and I think I checked it out from the library and I watched it and I was like, wow, that was surprisingly very good.
Yeah.
But yeah, how about you?
Well, it was the film class is the reason that I
that's
first
right.
watched it. Yeah. We were doing, like I said, we were doing a unit on comedies of remarriage, which is kind of a really fascinating mini genre in itself, because, you know, it's sort of like a subsection within, like, you know, 30s and 40s, the screwball comedy. The idea, it's very much a product of its time, because I'm like digging back through my memory to like what we talked about in class. From my memory, it's like, you know, you want to have the actual presence of sexual tension. You know, it's fun to have the idea of like, oh, these characters have slept with each other before, and maybe they're going to sleep with other people. But you can't really talk about that. You can't like be openly saying that people are sleeping with each other when they're not married. And so the idea is that if a couple is divorced and then you witness them get back together, there's that, it, you know, it makes that the sort of sex question so much more on the surface in a way that it would not be otherwise, if that makes sense.
Yeah. That's so interesting.
I mean, I think it's more complicated than that, but like that's just one thing that I remember us talking about, which I thought was really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so kind of jumping a little bit into one of the more overall themes of this movie, I wanted to ask you, what did you think about this film's portrayal of upper class wealthy people?
That's a great question, because it is, I feel like I always almost forget when I like watch this movie how big the class-ish element of it is. I mean, it's basically the entire thing.
I mean, the film talks a lot about, I mean, the characters, I think, literally bring it up. Like, yeah, we have a shit ton of money. Like,
yeah. I mean, it's so funny how, like, this scene, you know, it's these sort of, like, it's portraying these wealthy people in mainly a sympathetic light, but also with an eye to, well, you know, they have their blind spots because of the way they are. The scene where they first learn about the magazine people being present, and Dinah comes out in her little ballet shoes. And
I love
French,
it so
and,
much.
Like, it's so funny.
That is literally my favorite scene in the whole movie. I love it so much. Funny.
The way they're playing on, you know, the expectations they must have at the time of like what a wealthy Philadelphia family would be like. Which, by the way, I think at the time, like, Philadelphia and Boston were both kind of like, there were a lot of old money American families there, you know, Kennedy's in Boston, and I don't know who in Philadelphia, but like the idea of naming this movie the Philadelphia Story is kind of shorthand for like a story about people who are wealthy, old money, and like class. Don't quote me on that, but that's I think that's the case.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I didn't really have anything to say after that. Yeah, I'm just trying to think like other things related to class in this movie. I mean, just the like, you know, like you talked about this movie being kind of like, you know, having criticism or ideas about like the roles that women should fill. It's also kind of critical, but also understanding of the Jimmy Stewart character in certain ways. Like, I feel like the movie.
I wanted to ask because I don't remember what his backstory is, but he definitely seems to be someone who is very, very critical and cynical about people who have a lot of wealth.
Yeah. Yeah, like it's kind of interesting how you side with him at some times, but the film also has a bit of criticism for him in that he is so like he's so immediately contemptuous of the rich people. And then Katherine Hepburn at some point calls him a snob, which you can kind of see. But you're like, well, I mean, he's probably not wrong, especially from a modern lens. But yeah, he does seem to be this much more like working class, artistic, you know, probably a socialist, although we can't say that at this time period. You know, just he has a...
Don't we also learn in the beginning of the movie that he is like on the verge of being fired, which is why he has to take this job?
Yeah.
And he's like, why can't I just go off and write poetry? That's what I want to do. And then Liz is like, yeah, but you need to like have food, and you can't have food if you're writing poetry.
Yeah, it's true. Like, and he is a very like impractical guy in certain ways. Like, he's very contemptuous of the rich, but he does sort of share their like not fully cognizant of like how the world works. Like, I think Liz says at one point, like, he's got a lot to learn, and it is true. Like, this movie is very much a coming of age for him, whereas she's such a cool character. I love Liz. The whole revelation that she had a whole ass marriage and divorce, and Jimmy Stewart didn't even know about it, and she's like, I don't know, you never asked.
Well, he's like, why didn't you tell me this? I didn't know this. And she's like, well, you never asked.
She's so cool. And yeah, she clearly, like, she's been around, you know, she's much wiser in the ways of the world than he is. Like, she kind of knows what's going on, but she's willing to sort of like step back and kind of wait for him to figure it out. And it, you know, the movie's very clear about like, yeah, there are some things that he needs to figure out.
Yeah, and I also love giving Liz that power of her just being like, yeah, you know, I'm not going to marry this person until I want to, or like until I know that he really wants to be with me. And it feels like she's a lot more certain of what she wants and actually has authority over that. Whereas we see, so Liz is kind of more of a feminist in the sense that like she's learned a lot. She knows what she wants. She's not going to settle for less, all of those sorts of things. And then Tracy seems to be more of a representative of feminism in terms of like, let her just live her own life and figure out what she wants. It's okay if she's making mistakes. Like, she's going to be reckless. Women are not necessarily always these pristine, wively people, but also like women can figure things out for themselves and not be terrible people at the same time. And I think that that's kind of what she's trying to learn in this movie. Like, she is kind of being a little bit wild and running around with different people, but she's not a bad person because of that. She's just trying to figure things out. And I don't think she lies to anyone in this movie. Like, she's very honest about what happens and she's very straightforward. So I don't know if you agree with me on that, but I feel like it's two different sides of the same coin. They're showing women, like, this movie or this story is empowering women in multiple different ways. Well, also, I mean, putting them, you know, measuring that feminism on the scale against marriage and how relevant that is in their lives, but still.
Yeah, I mean, with Tracy Lord's like journey is so interesting because it's like men put her on this pedestal, but it's also one that she has sort of put herself on without even realizing it. Like, she's always loved. She holds herself to very high standards, and she holds everyone else to very high standards. And she loves that feeling of having that moral superiority over other people. And this movie is her coming to realize, actually, I'm just human like everyone else, and people are going to mess up and make mistakes, and that's okay. That's part of being human, and we need to have grace for one another, which, like, I don't know, does have a very interesting relationship to feminism, because it's like, yeah, we shouldn't be sort of idolizing women and putting them on pedestals and considering them to be, you know, people who have no flaws or people who are not allowed to mess up. But it's also sort of a universal message in a similar way too, you know. I don't know. It's an interesting one.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that's what I was thinking about the whole entire time watching this movie. I was like, so is this pro women? Is it anti women? It's both. But like, what is it?
Yeah.
Is it freeing? Is it? I couldn't really tell.
Yeah.
But,
And I mean, to be fair, like, pro women or anti women is probably not the binary that was in the mind of the screenwriter when they were making it. It was more like, how do we make a charming, like, you know, class and gender comedy that's people are gonna enjoy. But obviously it is saying something about the time in which it's made, and then more universal, you know, statements about people.
Yeah, so kind of digging into that a little bit more. So I wanted to ask you your thoughts on, because I think we see, obviously, women's lives from lots of different perspectives, different careers, different ages, almost kind of in a generational sense. What are your feelings towards Tracy's mom and kind of her perspective on like marriage and relationships and how she lives her life?
Oh, that's such a good question. Yeah, because she like, I can't remember if she has like does she have like a full speech where she sort of, because she has that, you know, Tracy is very contemptuous of the fact that she accepts Tracy's dad back after he like has an affair with some dancer or something like that. But then I feel like her mom says something, and I can't remember exactly what she says, but like basically, this is my choice. Don't judge me for it, or something like that. Am I misremembering?
Wait, what moment was that?
I thought there was some moment, like maybe 2/3 of the way through, where she's just like, yeah, I'm taking him back. Like, you know, but maybe I'm misremembering. I was just like, it is an interesting, maybe feminist in its own way, where it's like women are allowed to make the choices that they want to make. But then it's also seems like a shame that she feels like she can't just, you know, toss her philandering husband aside.
I mean, my takeaway from her character is that she is living vicariously through her daughters. It seems like she's very locked into the life that she has, the lifestyle that she has, and just like, where will she go, you know? And she seems so excited to see her daughter, you know, getting married, and oh, she was with this person and now she might be with this person. And there were almost kind of suggestions that maybe her mom and Dexter had something at some point. Like,
wait, what?
I don't know if you picked up on that, but I was like, wait, what? Did you not pick up on that?
I think it's just like, you know, they were once family. They still have that. They grew up together. I think they grew up really close. So they just know each other super well. And Cary Grant just has a lot of natural charisma.
Well, it's just I remember there was specifically one moment towards the beginning when he like steps up to her and she puts her hands on his chest and looks up in this like, you know, doting sort of way, and I was like, wait, what? Like, is there I'm interested, but I could just be projecting my own desires onto the story.
Oh my gosh.
But yeah,
I think that's either like cultural things that don't quite translate to the modern day, and or just the natural reaction of every woman when she encounters character.
Right. But yeah, I don't know. I just felt really bad for her in this story. It just seemed like she was trapped, didn't really have a way to get out. And so she's very excited for her daughters and the future that they can have that will be so different from the one that she's had to live. Because her husband sucks. And I don't know if Uncle Willie is her brother or her husband's brother.
That's a good question. Yeah.
He also sucks. But yeah, I guess I don't have any like intense thoughts on her, but I just remember I've just felt like there's so much commentary on women's rights and women's roles in the family in this movie, and hers just felt so drastically different from the women of a younger generation.
Yeah, that's really
as well
interesting.
as the men too, like the men of the older generations versus the men of the younger generations. The old ones feel a lot more entitled, a lot more what I say is what goes. I'm going to do whatever I want, and you can't really you don't really have any ability to respond to me or question me. Whereas the younger men here, they're kind of also it just, they all feel like young people that are figuring out love, and they're like, I don't know who I am. I don't know what I want. I think I feel something right now, but what, you know?
Yeah. Which I feel like is such a, you know, we love to see rich people who are like, yep, they've got all this money, but they have no idea what they're doing. Like, it's just fun to watch, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I wanted to ask also, just talking about all of the money, I was thinking watching this movie, I was like, this is a black and white movie that I wish was in color, because I feel like looking at the home and all of the decorations and the jewelry and the drapery and all of that stuff, I was like, man, this would look so vivid if this movie was in color. So a lot of times black and white films, I really appreciate them for how they look and how they're able to maximize, you know, how things look on screen, given the fact that they don't have the benefit, well, maybe not benefit, but like they don't have the ability to capture things in color. But this was something I was like, I really feel like it would have benefited from not being in black and white. Do you disagree with me? I feel like you might.
That, I honestly, it never occurred to me. Like, to me, this movie is a black and white movie, and that's just the only way I can picture it. I could definitely see, like, there is room here for a great Technicolor cinematographer and production designer to absolutely run wild. But it's just the sort of prestige rom-com dramas of the 40s, you know, were almost always black and white. So it's like, it's just hard for me to picture. Plus, High Society, the musical remake, is a color movie, and I don't know, that didn't help it, but I'm sorry. I'm so salty about that movie. I am not the biggest Grace Kelly fan. I think she's fine when she's well cast. You know, she's good. She's been good in some things, but it just, it's rough. It's rough for her.
Oh boy. I believe you. I wanted to ask real quick too, because I want to transition a little bit into talking about the humor in this movie. And so as I transition into that, I just wanted to bring up, I think it's hilarious watching all of these old movies when people say that they're 30 years old. I'm like, you look like you're 50. Not because your face looks like you're 50, but because of everything around how you're styled and how you're dressed. You just permanently look like you're middle aged. And I really, after Jimmy Stewart's character really explicitly said that he was 30, I spent the rest of the movie trying to convince myself that he was 30. And I was just like, nope, I still don't see it. Like, I can't see it. It doesn't work in my brain.
While you were saying that, I went and looked up his birth date. Yeah, he was 32 when he made that movie. Born in 1908.
He was your age.
He's my age. Oh my goodness. Wow.
That's crazy.
How am I not starring in the Philadelphia Story? So unaccomplished.
Oh my goodness. But I always find that to be so funny because they just don't, they just never look young to me because of this time period and how they're dressed. Not that they're dressed poorly. It just, I don't know.
Oh yeah.
Feels a lot more mature.
Our brains are wired to think of them as older. Plus, like, you know, I mean, they were all smoking up a storm, I'm sure. So, Katherine Hepburn in particular, I just looked up her age. She was a year older than Jimmy Stewart. She was 33.
Oh, okay.
But she's just one of those people who, like, is so ageless, you know? Like, she looked,
she looked the same age when she was, like, 70.
Yes. And when she was 16, I'm sure. Like,
yep.
She just never aged.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to transition a little bit. So like I said in the beginning, this movie is not really a movie where I care as much about the plot. And I think if you focus a lot on the plot, it can kind of get confusing a little bit. I just kind of want to talk a little bit more about the overarching themes here. I really, really love the comedy in this movie. I love it. This movie makes me laugh out loud. Like I said before, my favorite scene in this movie is Macauley Connor and Liz's introduction to Dinah. The way that not just her performance of this like highbrow, I was born in France child, but also the way that they respond to her is like, what the fuck is going on? like what story did we just walk into? Like, what is happening? And then they just like follow her into the other room, and then they're just like staring at each other. And
I feel like, am I wrong in thinking that like Macaulay Connor is sort of afraid of Dinah for the rest of the movie?
Oh my gosh, he 100% is. Oh my gosh. Yes.
As he should be.
And then we have that moment where he like goes into the other room and he's looking at the jewelry, and then the guy's just like standing there staring at him. He's like, I'm not taking anything. I was just looking. Like, leave me alone. I'm trying to think of other moments that made me laugh. I mean, there's so many. It's just
my favorite scene in the movie, apart from the scene you just mentioned, which is probably my favorite. My second favorite scene in the movie is the conversation between Cary Grant and Jimmy Stewart when Jimmy Stewart is smashed and he goes over C.K. Dexter Haven's house and he says the name C.K. Dexter Haven approximately 10 bazillion times.
Yes.
And he's just like talking about things that make no sense, and he's hiccuping, and Cary Grant is like trying desperately not to break, and it's just so funny and so charming. I love that scene so much.
Yeah, it's really a good one. I mean, I feel like a lot of times when I watch things and there's someone, particularly in older movies, someone portraying being drunk, it kind of feels very over the top to me. But this feels very real in this movie. I was like, no, he's just a goofball 30-year-old guy who got too drunk at a wedding and like thinks he might have feelings for this random beautiful girl that he met. And like, it's like, yeah, here's this other guy. You're my best friend now. I loved it. I thought it was great.
It's so good. It's so good. Yeah. Apparently the I think I'd read somewhere the hiccup was improv by Jimmy Stewart, which is why Cary Grant is so caught off guard by it. He's what a brilliant man.
There was a line that I wrote down in my notes when I was watching the movie of the morning after Tracy and Macaulay have that like night swimming by the pool, and Tracy's like very slowly piecing together what happened the night before. She's there with Dexter and he's kind of telling her a little bit about everything. And then there's one point when he reveals that George showed up and she goes, George was here too? And he goes, sure. And then she goes, why didn't you just sell tickets? Like it was such a dramatic night. Why didn't you just sell tickets?
So good.
Oh man. Yeah, I wish I wanted to like take notes of all the lines and specific moments that I found funny, but they just kept coming and I was like, I can't keep writing this down.
Right.
So I'm just trying to remember more off the top of my head, but oh, geez.
Yeah, there's too many. There's too many.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about that moment where Macaulay Connor learns about Liz's previous marriage, and he's like, I didn't know anything about that. It's like, well, you never asked. Oh, and then there's that whole bit in the beginning about how Dinah does not like that that Tracy's marrying someone else and she wants to stop the wedding, and Tracy's like, the only way you could do that is if you get smallpox, and she's like, how do I get smallpox?
That's right.
Oh,
that's
my
such
goodness.
a specific disease to like pull out.
Dinah's incredible. I love her. And then there's that moment where when her and Tracy are speaking in French and all that Liz and Macaulay are hearing are smallpox because they don't speak French, and they're both like, wait, they like take a step back because they're not sure what's happening.
I didn't even catch that. Oh my goodness.
Oh,
need to watch that scene again.
Oh, it's so good. And then when Uncle Willie shows up and they're like, Father.
Yeah, but then Father shows up
the dad's coming. And they're like,
and then the dad shows
Willie.
up.
And
he's
then
like,
at some
what?
point,
and they're like, just go with it.
And then it's like within a few hours, the dad's like, yeah, we're not doing this. I'm just going to go tell them. Like, no, this is insane. Oh, man. I'm trying to remember if there's anything else that particularly made me funny. I mean, made me laugh. I mean, there's that bit at the end where he's like telling her everything to say out to the audience of the people that are like there for the wedding, and she's just kind of repeating whatever he says.
Oh,
and
that was so cute.
It was cute. Weren't there some funny things in there that he threw out? Maybe not. I don't remember.
I mean, I think the main thing was just the like, we're gonna go through with getting married, and her reaction to that is so adorable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
also,
I guess
with
with
funny things, just the whole the everything between Tracy and Mike when they're both wasted and he's singing Somewhere Over the Rainbow and she keeps calling him professor and he keeps getting annoyed. They have such good chemistry. Like it's
really
so
do
funny,
have good
but
chemistry.
They do. It's so funny, but so charming. You know, just seeing them hang out, you know, and be loose together. It's great.
So, what are your thoughts on Katherine Hepburn, Jimmy Stewart, and Cary Grant here? Because I know you're a Cary Grant fan. For me, I'm just like, Katherine Hepburn and Jimmy Stewart, their performances are phenomenal. And Cary Grant, I'm like, yeah, you're just there.
Well, it's funny.
What are your thoughts?
It's funny. I'm actually not the biggest Cary Grant fan, or actually, I should say, I've become more of one in just the last few years, particularly seeing Arsenic and Old Lace for the first time. I don't know if you've ever seen that.
Mm-mm.
That is a screwball comedy where he is off the wall. Like, he is like on cocaine the whole time. Like,
wow.
It's insane how he's basically just spending the entire movie like running around and losing his mind. And it's so funny. Like, he's a really good physical comedian. In Holiday, the movie I mentioned before, he's like doing flips all over the place.
Oh, wow.
It's like a plot point that every time he's happy, he has to do a flip. So yeah, I feel like there are different modes of Cary Grant, and the mode that I had kind of grown up with was like, you know, him in Hitchcock movies where he's you know, he's like charming, suave, and then him in this where he is, you know, it's very much relying on his sort of like handsomeness and his charisma, but he is more of the not fade into the background because he's a really important character, but like he's the straight man for all the craziness that's going on around him. So yeah, it's not a standout or showy performance in the same way that Katherine Hepburn or Jimmy Stewart's are. And I don't mean that, you know, in any way derogatory towards them. It's just that's the role that he plays in it. He's the one that they're kind of bouncing off of. So I think he does it really well. It's just, you know, it's hard to judge because it's not a performance where you can like really see what he's doing. Has to be the steady presence there for the rest of them to revolve around. So, and that's, you know, it's a hard thing to do. Like, no disrespect to him. I think he does it very well. The one thing that no, we should talk about this a little bit later. Those are my thoughts on Cary Grant's performance.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with you. I think that Cary Grant does a good job with what he has. I think his character is just, by the nature of, you know, of how it's written, it's a little bit more of a subdued, kind of like I said in the beginning, a sit back and watch. Like, he sets everything up and then just watches it unfold. And then as it happens, he goes up to people and he's like, yeah, that was kind of crazy, wasn't it? Like, didn't see that one coming. I love how the moment at the end, like immediately when George and Tracy decide that they're not moving forward with the marriage, Dexter's like, okay, like I've got all my stuff, I'm ready. And then he's like, okay, you can very clearly tell that he's been waiting for this moment. And like, it came up down to the wire, like up until the last minute. And then he was ready to go.
Yeah. Which actually, so this is the question I was going to ask. May as well, we should just talk about this now. Sure. To what extent, well, I guess kind of what are your thoughts on the relationship between Dexter and Tracy, especially since we learn over the course of it that the thing that had originally messed up their first marriage was the fact that he was an alcoholic and she, you know, being this sort of like, has these high standards, can't tolerate weakness in others, couldn't stand that. He's apparently since gotten sober. And I'm very curious, too, about what your thoughts are. Does he basically, from minute one in this movie, intend to win her back? Because it's hard to tell. Like, he does have this sort of plausible, like, oh, I'm just trying to protect the family. I'm letting these journalists in so that, you know, the story about her father doesn't get out. I just have to be around for that. But it's also like, yeah, but Art, did you kind of engineer this so that you could be around Tracy and get her to fall back in love with you? Like, it's kind of hard to tell, but because he doesn't seem very like outwardly manipulative, and I don't mean manipulative in like a bad way, but just in a, like, it doesn't seem like he's trying to do something, but if he is, it definitely works, you know. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I saw him as being manipulative from the very beginning. Like, again, like not necessarily in a bad way, but I think it's kind of explicitly said in the beginning that the reason he's doing this is because he wants to get back at her. Like, yes, there is this this, you know, killing two birds with one stone of you're protecting the family from this scandalous story of what the father did, but he's also kind of hoping that he can embarrass or humiliate Tracy in the meantime to get back for her for, you know, how their marriage ended, which we didn't even talk about the beginning scene where she like throws all of his stuff on the ground and then he like pushes, you know, which is kind of aggressive, but but you definitely have this sense of like, you know, they might not have ended on the best terms.
They were a tempestuous couple at the best of times.
So
which is like, I feel like with so many of these comedies of remarriage, you really do end with the sense of like, well, they're back together, but honestly, how long is this actually going to last?
Yes.
There was a reason they divorced in the first place.
So I do think he did start out with some sort of intention that was not, you know, wholesome and just like, let's protect the family. I think he wanted to ruin Tracy and George's marriage, but I don't know if he necessarily wanted to do that so that he could then marry her again. Yeah. So that was kind of my takeaway. And I actually love that you asked that question because literally the next thing I wanted to dive into was our thoughts on her relationship with each of the men in this. Her relationship with Dexter, her relationship with Mike, and then her relationship with George, because they're all very different. So was there anything further that you kind of wanted to comment about in terms of her relationship with Dexter?
I mean, I guess I feel like I have a slightly different interpretation of Dexter's motives in that I think because he says to the editor, like, actually, the reason I want to do this is because I want to get back at Tracy and ruin her wedding. My interpretation is that he's lying to the editor, and the reason he actually wants to do it is because he just wants to be around, and if there's a chance that he could talk to Tracy and they could eventually fall back in love and he could like convince her, that's my interpretation, that his goal from the go
that is very different from mine. Yeah. That's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It just, like, there doesn't seem to be any maliciousness on his side, apart from, like, he is still a little annoyed about the way she treated him because he feels like she was unfair on him. But, yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's hard to say, but that was the way that I had interpreted it, that he was just like, now that I've gotten sober, I'm interested in seeing if I can maybe restart things with Tracy. Obviously, she's about to get married, but, like, maybe if I can be around, you know, something might happen. And I don't know, he you know, he has these conversations with George where he's definitely not like doing anything to aggressively to try to interfere, but he's kind of asking questions and being like, yeah, you know, maybe you don't know Tracy as well as you do. Maybe like, kind of like poking at like, is this actually a good fit? And pretty quickly revealing like, no, not really. This is also headed for disaster. Yeah. I mean, just for me to dive a little bit into her relationship with each of these men, I think that Dexter definitely has the most awareness of who she is. I mean, given the fact that they were married, you know? Yeah. And I think she says at one point they had basically like grown up together. Like they were neighbors for years or something like that.
Yeah, I think you're right. But yeah, so he obviously like knows her more so as a human being than any of these other men. And then George seems to have created her into this trophy wife. Like there's one point where he talks about like, I'm going to lock you in a tower, and he says it in a way that he thinks is romantic, and she's like, wait, what? Like,
don't we love hearing that?
And so he definitely has this mentality of like, you are this prized possession that once I have you, I'm going to keep you and I won't let you go away. And it kind of seems romantic in the beginning, but from my perspective, I see the potential for it to be very toxic going forward.
Well, there's also this. Sorry. Finish your thought.
Yeah. And I was just going to say, I think Dinah sees that too, even though she's young. She's like, yeah, fuck that guy. Like, like he sucks. Like,
what I was going to say is that there's also an interesting, like to go back to the class element, George, right? Is the fiance's name? Yeah. Much is made of the fact that he is new money. Like he's some sort of like factory manager or business owner or something. I can't remember exactly what it is.
But
like,
it sounds like he's an aspiring politician almost, though.
Yeah, but this idea is like he's not like he's a rich person. So he's like them in that regard, but he's not like them in that he didn't inherit his money.
He's self-made
from his family.
Yeah.
He's self-made. And so he does see Tracy as the sort of prize in the sense of like, this indicates that I have officially made it. Like I've now married into the old money, elite. But he is also very much an outsider because he didn't grow up with these people. He doesn't really know their ways. He doesn't really understand the way that they think. He especially doesn't understand the way that Tracy thinks. It is very much like for him it's a prize. For her it's maybe like, I don't know, proof of her humanity or proof that she's not like a stuck-up elite because she's marrying a man of the people, except he's kind of sucks. Like I'm not entirely sure what she sees in George, except for the fact that probably she just wants someone who's as opposite to Dexter as possible.
Yeah, it's so going off of what you were saying about George too, I think when you look at the ending and how their marriage or their relationship ends, when he writes that letter and she's reading it, the letter has a lot more to do with, you've insulted me because a wife shouldn't behave like this. A wife shouldn't do this, as opposed to like, I personally have been hurt. I love you. I'm upset. How could you do It's a lot more of like, yeah, like a wife of quality would not behave this way and la la la. And when they finally call it off, he seems to be disappointed, but he doesn't seem to be all that upset about it the way he would be if he genuinely really loved this person. And I actually didn't think about that until you talked about him the way you did just now. But I think you're right. For him, it's a lot more of the marriage would be a lot more of like a status confirmation as opposed to a actual loving relationship. At least from my perspective. Yeah, as far as what Tracy sees in him, I wonder if it's almost just like, I think a lot of people after her previous marriage look at her as this impulsive, reckless woman who makes poor decisions and, Dexter's the man that got away and what did she do and la la la. And I think she's really trying to prove herself to society of like, no, I can find a nice person and a normal person and be in a healthy relationship, when deep down she knows that's not possible. Like, but she's trying to fulfill the societal expectations that she initially let down in her first marriage.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
I think that's what she's striving for, but you also see in the fact that like she starts sort of a short fling with Mike and all of these other things. Like, she's not really in this at all. She's just doing it because it's an expectation. That's my interpretation, but
yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Like, I need to prove that I'm not this flighty, divorce-prone woman. I need to find the most boring, solid man that I can think of who's like not gonna run away from me.
He can't even ride a horse.
Oh my gosh, that scene.
Oh my goodness.
Which again, like the class thing, he didn't grow up riding a horse like the rest of them. And he's really bad at it.
He's really bad at it. Yeah. Yeah. So what do you think about, I think the relationship that I find the most fascinating is the one between her and Mike, because it comes on so suddenly. It's a light that burns bright and fades fast.
It really does.
Because he gets there and he's like, this lady's crazy. This family's crazy. I don't even want to be here. I don't want to write this story. I don't even like these people because they're wealthy and snobby. And then all of a sudden he gets drunk and he's like, I'm in love with you. And then the next morning they're both like, wait, what? Do we like each other? What's going on? Like, what even happened last night? Like, so what are your thoughts on kind of their relationship to each other throughout this movie?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess a crucial step in that is when they meet each other at the library. Like,
right.
They had talked
She's
about
reading
how
his book.
Yeah, she reads his book and she likes it and she appreciates it. So I feel like there's this element in which they initially meet on a sort of like artistic or intellectual level,
Mm-hmm.
where, you know, like George sees her as this like status prize, and I think Mike sees her as like a potential muse. You know, he's like,
Yeah.
she's just this woman who's so far above, and like, you know, she inspires these like poetic thoughts, and she appreciates my art and stuff like that.
Doesn't
and you know,
he say at one point that she like has holocausts going on inside of her?
yeah,
And I'm like, bro, it's 1940. Like, what?
That is not the use of the
Definitely
word that
too
it's gonna
soon.
mean. Yeah.
Too soon.
Yeah, because I think the original meaning of the word Holocaust is like what, something like big explosions, or I'm gonna look it up really quick.
But literally, the Holocaust was happening while this movie was being
Mass
made. So I
destruction,
feel like
basically.
either way, they should have used a different word.
I don't think that word was being used in that way at that point, but it was a pretty unfortunate
Yes.
use of it.
But yeah, he was just like spouting all of this poetry to her.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What's he like? He's like, you're a goddess, you're a queen,
You're a star.
Yeah.
You shine so bright.
That's right.
What do you want? Do you want the moon? I'll throw a lasso and pull it down for you.
Wrong movie. Oh, Jimmy Stewart and his romantic speeches out in the moonlight.
I was thinking about watching this movie. Mm-hmm. Jimmy Stewart, I just love him so much. He has so many isms that are so specifically just him. Like when he enters the house, the way he was just walking around, like holding his hat and holding his coat. I was like, that no one else walks like Jimmy Stewart.
Truly,
no one else takes their hat off like Jimmy Stewart.
It's just like such a, as the kids would say, he's got riz. He's just like, he's such an he's like not conventionally handsome in the way that Cary Grant is, or, you know, some other people, but there's just something so magnetic about him, you know. He's got such great chemistry with all his screen partners, male and female. He really like holds the screen. Oh, I love him.
Sorry, I distracted you from what you were saying, though.
Oh, no worries. What was I saying again? Oh, yeah, just like they first bond because he's like, oh, she has hidden depths if she like can appreciate the brilliance of my writing, and he's like, or that's what he's like, and then she's like, oh, like actually this guy, he seems kind of snobby, but he actually does have like an artistic soul. So they're able to like meet on a certain level. It's just, this was only ever going to be a transitional affair for both of them. You know, they meet a very temporary need because she's feeling lonely and vulnerable, and she needs someone to make her feel better. And, you know, he's like, I guess needs to lose his head over a beautiful woman at some point before he can like realize he's not all that and settle down. So yeah.
Also, props to Liz for just like watching this go down and being like, you know what? I'm just gonna let him do his thing. Yep. Like she's not hating on him for it. She's not making it dramatic. She's not like, oh, I'm so upset, I'm heartbroken. She's just kind of like, yeah, this needed to happen. He needed to have this experience. Like, all right, like, you know. So I feel like there's an alternate version of this story where she gets jealous, and then the love quadrangle or whatever you want to call it gets bigger, and she's just like, no, I'm confident enough. I'm just gonna sit here and wait, and if he gets his shit together and realizes that I'm a catch, great. And if he doesn't, then like no skin off my back.
She's so freaking cool. Like, oh man,
I love her.
All the props to Liz. She's amazing.
She's awesome. Yeah. I find her relationship with Mike to be just, it feels like a very young, almost teenager fling to me, of just like, it's new, it's exciting, it's not practical at all. They clearly are not thinking past the next 1 minute when they're together. We're just like, we're here now and cool. Like, whatever happens here, right now.
We're both smashed. We're both attracted to each other. Like, you know.
Yeah.
What else do we need to think about? He's
an incredible singer, apparently. Like,
which, by the way, what was Wizard of Oz just like 2 years before this? He was singing Over the Rainbow, and I was like,
I was thinking the same thing. I was like, did that song come out before the Wizard of Oz?
Am I wrong in thinking that George Cukor like co-directed Wizard of Oz?
I don't know. Didn't the Wizard of Oz come out after that? I don't know, but I thought the same thing. I was like, when did that movie actually come out?
Yeah. I'm a quick look it up while we talk, but keep going.
Well, something that happened between her and Mike very early on that I actually wanted to mention that I loved was when he and Liz come to the house for the first time, and then Tracy walks into the room and she's kind of asking all these questions to get to know them. There's this one point where I think Liz and Mike both take out cigarettes, and Mike takes out a lighter to light his, but Tracy already has a lighter there, and he's like, I don't think a woman's supposed to light my cigarette. I think I'm supposed to light my own. But she's like holding it out. And so he's like, well, okay. And then he lets her light it.
I didn't even catch that. Which, by the way, sorry, Wizard of Oz was the year before, 1939, but it was not directed by George Cukor.
Okay. Gotcha.
But yeah, this is a recent pop song, basically, like pulling it right off the charts and sticking in the movie.
Dang.
Anyway, sorry, continue your point.
No, I thought that was a really cool interaction of just kind of showing an initial intrigue between the two of them of like, whoa, this woman's different. Like, she's kind of exciting to me. What's going on? Mm-hmm. And I liked that kind of thwart of traditional standards of the man lights the woman's cigarette. And I also like that at the end of that sequence, I think there's one moment where she asks Liz a question and Liz is like, that question's inappropriate. And Tracy goes, really? I think it's interesting or something like that. I thought that was so cool.
Oh, yeah. Is that the part where she asks them if they're together, like if they're dating, right?
Yes.
I think, right? And Liz is like,
Well, and then after that, Tracy gets up and leaves the room and Mike is like, wait, who's doing the interviewing here? Like, what just happened? Like, oh my gosh. Man. They just feel like a young couple who they have a very electric attraction to each other that comes and they're like, let's see what happens. And then it goes away and they're like, all right, that was fine. Yep. You know, like it was fun while it lasted.
Yep. Teenage hormones that burn themselves out pretty quick.
I loved it. It was very sweet. And I liked how their interactions with each other helped them discover enough about themselves to realize that Mike is like, yeah, I want to be with Liz. And then Tracy's like, well, I think I just want to be my own person. And then Dexter comes along and shows that he seemingly is supportive of that person. He's like, I've known who you are all along. Like, welcome. But yeah, do you have any further thoughts on Tracy's relationship, either with Dexter, Mike, or George, or any of the other relationships between two people in this movie? There's so many like crisscrosses of relationships here.
Yeah, there really are. Yeah, I mean, I guess like, I don't know, the fact that she ends up with Dexter, I don't know. I would be so curious to know what it was that originally drew them together. They do seem to make sense together in a certain way. Like it does. I feel like I believe this remarriage more than I believe maybe some other remarriage movies that I've seen, because I can see how it's like they know each other super well. He accepts a lot, like he understands her flaws and her foibles and he accepts them by and large. He's just like, I really wish that she was a more understanding and empathetic person. Like that's kind of the one thing that he's always bumped up against. She bumped up against his alcoholism, which is you know, he seems to have kind of mostly put behind him. And so like I think they do have a genuine chance of being happy next time. I mean, who knows, but like it does seem like he really is very supportive of her independence, and like all the ways that he wants her to change are just changes for the better, for her becoming, you know, growing as a person. Like he doesn't want to inhibit her in any way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, they seem to have a relationship dynamic where if I'm envisioning them in a marriage, it just seems like they would be the type of couple where they're just arguing all the time, and it's like it blows up out of proportion. Then they're like, I'm leaving, I'm never coming back, and then they come back 3 hours later and it's like, I'm so sorry, and then they just have like crazy sex all night or something. It just feels very like, it feels like something that for some people would be a toxic relationship, but for them might work. And it just seems like he probably is someone who just pushes her buttons and makes her annoyed. And then she's like, what are you doing? Like, I'm going to come back at you. And then he's like, oh, I like that. And then she's like, oh, I like that you like that. And then like, it just seems to be a very toxically compatible relationship, if that makes sense. Like, I think they're just going to be moving in and out of the house on a regular basis for the rest of time, and I think it'll work for them.
Yeah. I mean, like, if it can work for anyone, I think it could work for them. And especially, like, you can't picture her with George. Like, it's just to marry someone who is not willing to have that sort of like cycle of, you know, push and pull in their relationship. It would just be a disaster for her. You know, she'd feel bored and frustrated and hemmed in like within 2 days. And, you know, he would be all upset because he's like, well, this is not who I thought I was marrying. And it would just, it just wouldn't work out.
And I think we see that at the end with one of her final lines that she says. It's something of like, I don't want to be a goddess or a princess. I want to be a human being. I feel like I'm a human being for the first time. And I think that out of all of these characters that we've seen in this movie, aside from maybe Dinah, like Dexter's like, yeah, just be who you are, Red. Like, I'm here, I'm sober. Like, you know, he doesn't really undermine her ever in this movie. I feel like there are a lot of moments where people are either elevating her to a level that she's like, I'm not an angel. I'm not perfect. Why are you putting me on this pedestal? Or people are putting her down of like, what's wrong with you? Why do you behave this way? Why are you so rough? Why are you so selfish? Whereas Dexter is kind of the only one that's just like, he talks to her like she is who she is and challenges her, but also cracks jokes. And I don't know, they just seem to have a very equal relationship and like respect for each other.
Yeah.
Does the film start with him shoving her to the ground? Yes. So
not great.
Like, really not. I'm not condoning such behavior. That is not acceptable. But I don't know. I love this movie and how, and I guess like the original play, I haven't seen it, but just like how it intertwines all of these different human beings and creates drama, but in a way that's not, I don't really like movies or stories that have a lot of unnecessary drama in them. I get very frustrated. I'm like, why don't you just stop? Like, why don't you just stop? Like, we don't need this drama in life. What's happening? Whereas this movie, it feels like the drama unfolds in a way that's very natural and, I don't know, just entertaining. I really like this movie.
Can I ask you one other question just about like sort of Tracy Lord's psychology and the choices that she makes? Why do you think she makes that choice to drink heavily the night before her wedding, which ultimately leads to her like hanging out with Mike? I think they say like, you know, nothing happened, but it definitely looks suspicious. I think she starts it right after she has that conversation with her father where he's sort of scolding her. So do you think it's more like something about that conversation particularly that like sparked that? Or do you think it's more like she's realizing that this marriage is a mistake, but she can't admit it to herself yet? And so she's like kind of grasping at, you know, sort of like wanting to self-destruct. I don't know. Like, what do you think about why she makes that choice?
Yeah, I mean, my perception is that it starts with her conversation with her father, like you said, and her initial thought is like, I'm just upset that I've disappointed you, that I can't be what you want. Like, I'm just going to give up. I'm not trying anymore. Like, fuck this. So then she starts drinking. But then once she starts drinking, like, the more drunk she gets, the more realization she has of like, hey, maybe I actually don't want to be dancing with this person right now. Maybe I don't want to go home right now. Like, I want to stay out and have fun. You can't make me go home. Oh, hey, here's this person that I am enjoying spending time with, and I'd rather spend the night with him than with my husband-to-be. And then through the process of doing that, being like, oh, I kind of like being free and having fun and being able to make my own decisions. And then, you know, I think it's just kind of like it starts somewhere and then the ball keeps rolling, which, you know, when the ball stops rolling, that's when she is at a point where she's like, oh, I want to be my own person. None of these people are letting me do that. And then she looks around and she realizes, oh, but Dexter will let me do that. So I think it starts with a kind of like, I'm done trying to impress my father, like, because nothing I'm doing is working. And then that just compounds upon itself as the night goes on. That's kind of my thought.
Yeah, I like that. That makes sense. Yeah. Which, like, again, with the, her ultimately being most compatible with Dexter, I love how there's that conversation earlier where he's like, the one time I've ever seen you get drunk, you like climbed up on a rooftop naked. But he says this in his way where he's like really amused at it. He's not scandalized. He's just like, and she's like, that never happened. What are you talking about? I have no memory of that. He's like, yeah, sure. And then he's like, he's kind of like, he's sort of amused the next day about what happened and sort of enjoying that, like knowing that, this marriage is going to fall apart. But he's like, he has no judgment for her.
No.
He's just very like, well, this is kind of you finally letting loose in a way that's probably ultimately going to be good for you. I just kind of enjoyed that.
Yeah, like I said before, I think his role a lot of times in this movie is him just standing back and looking at people being like, yeah, that was kind of crazy, right? Like, I definitely saw that coming. Like, I feel like the more we're talking, the more I'm appreciating Dexter's character.
Oh, good. He is, as I kept thinking as I was watching this movie, especially that scene with the, drunk Jimmy Stewart, he really does have one of the greatest names in, like, character names in film history. C.K. Dexter Haven is such a, like, long and ridiculous name. And they say it so many times in this movie, and I love it. C.K. Dexter Haven. Oh, C.K. Dexter Haven.
I love it.
It's so funny.
I love it. I'm trying to think if there's anything else here. I just want to say her father sucks. I don't like him. The fact that he is like justifying him cheating on his wife with a young person because he's like, yeah, men have a natural desire to be young. But then also he's like,
no, of course that never happens to women. Women just accept getting old.
Right. And then he also is like just really mean to his daughter. Like he says some nasty stuff to Tracy in this movie. And then at the end, I feel like the movie tries to repair it of her being like, I'm sorry I disappointed you. And he's like, you could never disappoint me. And I'm like, you literally just said yesterday that she was like, you didn't say you were disappointed in her. You said a lot of things that were way worse than I'm disappointed in you. So I'm not a fan of her dad at all. He sucks, but
he sucks.
Yeah. I don't know. I think that's everything that I have. I wish I had more to say about Liz, but I don't think I have.
Yeah. I mean, Liz doesn't have a huge role in the movie.
Yeah.
I wish she had a little bit more, but it makes sense. She's just, she's so cool.
And I'm not even going to give Uncle Willie the respect of mentioning him at all because he's just terrible.
What an unfortunate name as well.
I don't know why he's in this movie. Like, he does not need to be here at all. Like, it adds that one little funny joke that one time of like, oh, they call him the father and then the dad shows up. But like, aside from that, I'm like, why is he in this?
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
But whatever. This is 1940, so I guess I need to just accept that someone behaving that way on screen towards women is acceptable or funny. Like, I guess back then maybe it was supposed to be funny and get laughs, and I'm like, that's not funny to me, but okay.
Yeah, I mean, like, the pinch I think is meant in an innocent way. I don't think it's meant in a like sexual way. It's still gross.
But he does that to Liz too. It makes Liz very uncomfortable.
Oh, I forgot about that.
Remember?
Yeah.
Like he says a lot of really nasty things to her and like touches her in ways that she's clearly not consenting to.
Yeah.
Like
he's gross. He's like
gross. Yeah. So yeah, Uncle Willie gross, Seth the worst. Everyone else pretty great. Yeah, anything else you want to say or you feeling pretty good?
Yeah, I think we've covered pretty much all the major elements of it.
Okay. Cool. I guess I just want to say, oh yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Just a tiny thing, but just like, again, with the like interesting portrayal of like class in the 1940s. The fact that it's like this 1940s old family, like that everyone seems to know, but they're so closed off from publicity and they're so anti-publicity. They're so anti having anyone like get in, interviews, photos of the wedding. Like, it's just a very different sort of publicity, celebrity landscape than what we have today.
It was crazy because there was one point where they were saying, like, there's no privacy anymore in this world. And blah, blah. I think Tracy literally says, like, the only place for privacy is in the bedroom. And then she looks at Dexter and is like, sometimes not even there.
That was a great line.
And I'm like, that's a great line. But also, y'all don't even know what privacy looks like in 100 years. So
you have no idea what is coming.
You don't even know. But yeah, I love that line when she just kind of smirked at him and he was like, huh, that's funny. little inside joke.
So good.
But
yeah, it's means. Like this time where it's like considered like déclassé, you know, it's considered like, oh, it's so tacky for you to have reporters at your wedding. It's like,
yeah. But also reporters did just kind of walk in out of nowhere.
They
were
really
like,
did.
Hey, we're going to write an article on you.
Yeah. Oh, hey, we definitely know your child who's for some reason not attending his sister's wedding.
Right, exactly. Okay, and then the one final thing I wanted to say is I feel like I didn't really talk enough about just the writing of this script. I think it's brilliant. I love the pacing. This movie is so fast. It almost feels like a Wes Anderson screenplay in terms of like everyone's talking really fast, and then if you're not paying attention, you might miss something. It's just the dialogue is so good. There really isn't much that happens in this movie. Everything that happens in this movie is because people are talking to each other. And I think that is such a fascinating way for a film to be made, which I guess that mainly is because it comes from a stage play. But just like, if people weren't talking, nothing in this movie would be happening. And the fact that this whole story is like just pushed forward by the writing and the dialogue, gosh, I just think it's brilliant. I love it. And the delivery that the actors give. And I just wish I could be on set seeing the director interacting with the actors and pulling things out of them and seeing how they engage with each other. Like, I feel like it would be so exciting to be on this set with these people.
Definitely. Yeah.
So exciting.
Especially because George Cukor, his reputation was very much like as an actor's director. Like, he was especially acting with women. Like, he a lot of his movies are notable for having these really iconic female performances. I think female actresses really loved working with him because he was just so good at, you know, bringing the best out of them.
And then one more thing, sorry, before we go, Geneva, I feel like I have to ask you, what are your thoughts on the costumes in this movie?
Oh,
how could we not talk about this?
I mean, they're great. You know, they're gorgeous. I don't feel like there was a whole lot. Well, actually, let me look up some, because I'm like, not a whole lot of specific outfits that stood out. I mean, they're all just, you know, gorgeous and glamorous and iconic.
If you go to IMDb, they've got some really good pictures.
Okay, I'm scrolling through. Oh, her gingham ruffly gown that she wears when she's trying to pretend that she's like an upper class, you know, when they first meet her. That was really great. Oh, the dress that she wears that's like a white, I think it might be like when she's at the party where she first starts getting drunk. It's like white. It's got this, it looks like it might be gold, like embellishing on the top, and then this belt. Really beautiful. I love the long bathrobe that she wears. She and Jimmy Stewart both wear when they're like they go for the dip in the pool. Yeah, I don't know, just all good, you know, all good. Yeah. Did you have a specific outfit or anything that stood out to you?
Well, I was just going to say we all, or at least me personally, but we love seeing Katherine Hepburn in some beautiful pants.
Yes.
She wears pants,
her riding
like
pants,
no one else. Oh my gosh. Just stunning.
Yeah.
Absolutely stunning.
Her
like
in
when
her
she goes riding, her outfit when she goes riding. I know that's like a traditional riding outfit, but for some reason on her it looks better. I don't know.
It really does. I was like,
but
should I buy myself some riding pants? Do they make riding pants?
Yeah, you should.
I would not be able to pull them off as well as she does. Oh.
You never know. You should try.
Never know until you try.
Yeah. But anyway, I just wanted to make sure I asked you about the costumes, because I know that sometimes in period pieces you really connect with them. So
Yes, definitely. Yes. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, of course. Okay. All of that being said, I think
right.
I'm going to transition to close us out a little bit.
Let's do it.
So talking a little bit about just the award recognition for this movie. So as we've talked about, the performances in this movie are phenomenal. Jimmy Stewart actually won for Best Actor in a Leading Role.
Interesting. I don't think I'm sure I had heard that at some point. It's interesting that he ran lead and not supporting. Yeah,
so Jimmy Stewart, he won Best Actor in a Leading Role, and Cary Grant was not even nominated for anything. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
And then Donald Ogden Stewart won for Best Screenplay. So this movie had 2 Oscar wins, but then it also was nominated for Best Picture, Best Actress for Katherine Hepburn, Best Supporting Actress for Ruth Hussey, and then Best Director for George Cukor. So, I think all of that makes sense to me. I'm sure some people maybe would prefer that Cary Grant be nominated here. I don't necessarily see it, but that's fine.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fine with Jimmy Stewart. I mean, obviously it's the more flashy role. I'm also very curious. I actually don't know this, like where he was in his star. Like, was he considered to be a star at this point, or was he more like he's on the rise?
Jimmy Stewart or Cary Grant?
Jimmy Stewart, sorry.
Well,
like obviously he was known. I just like, had he kind of like reached a like peak level, or was this movie like putting him on that peak level?
So before this, The Shop Around the Corner had come out a few years prior. Yes.
Love that
but
movie.
Aside from that, I mean, he's been in so many movies before this. I mean, but none of them seem to be that big, aside from Shop Around the Corner. And then after Philadelphia Story is like It's a Wonderful Life and la 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 la.
Yeah. He was in movie that I talked about a while back. You Can't Take It With You. I think a few years before that Frank Capra movie. So yeah, he was definitely like had been doing leading roles for a while. So yeah, I'm sure he was a big star at this point.
Well, I mean, like I said in the beginning, like the studio that funded this movie, because they were less certain about Katherine Hepburn's box office appeal, they intentionally brought in Cary Grant and Jimmy Stewart.
Oh, that's right. You did say that. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, so we had enough clot to...
Yeah. Oh, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington was just the year before. Yeah, it's like one of his iconic... Yeah, okay. Yeah. Never mind.
Yeah. But yes, so this movie obviously won 2 awards and was nominated for several, which it deserved. I'm really glad it won Best Screenplay. Like, absolutely deserved.
Very well deserved. Kind of ridiculous that Katherine Hepburn didn't win Best Actress. I just looked it up. The winner that year was Ginger Rogers for Kitty Foyle. Ginger Rogers is a wonderful actress, and I have never seen Kitty Foyle. I'm sure she's great in it. But it just... I mean, Katherine Hepburn, like, she won, like, so many Oscars. Like, she's fine. But it just seems strange that this wouldn't be one of them. Yeah.
So in terms of critical response, so this movie has a 96 on Metacritic and a 100% on Rotten Tomatoes. So, very critically acclaimed. And I kind of, like I hinted at in the beginning of this review, of our episode, I looked up some reviews for this movie. A lot of them were primarily just about the acting performances. So I didn't want to just read a bunch of reviews that were like, Katherine Hepburn is great. Jimmy Stewart is great. So I chose one that is written by Catherine Howard from the Fort Worth Star-Telegram from 1941. It had an image of an actual newspaper clip, which I thought was super cool. I love film archives. It's so great. But anyway, it says, in the movie, unlike the stage play, Miss Hepburn is by no means the whole show. Grant and Stewart are perfect. In the events leading up to and including the midnight swim after a champagne party, Stewart couldn't be beat. But Miss Hepburn has accomplished the thing she set out to do with both movie and stage play. She has made the showmen who labored her box office poison eat their words and rue the day they were ever so uncomplimentary.
I love it.
I thought that was cool.
And that was written by a Catherine Howard, women supporting women. Love it.
We love. So yeah, just to kind of close out, I don't really have anything further to say aside from I just think this movie is sublime. It is so well written. I love the cast, the performances. How everyone interacts with each other is just electric. It's so fast-paced. It's so entertaining, so engaging. And I like that it is, in whatever ways that it could, given the time period, I like that it pushes more of a feminist perspective for women in terms of relationships and marriage and things like that. So yeah, I really like this movie. I'm glad we got a chance to talk about it. Katherine Hepburn is a goddess. I love her.
Yes, she is.
Even before, I think this might have been the first movie that I ever saw her in, which, like I said before, was only 5-6 years ago. But even before that, I knew of Katherine Hepburn and like her legacy, and I was already obsessed with her. Just knowing who she was as a person. So yeah, this is a great movie. I'm glad we got to talk about it.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. I mean, I already love this movie, but I feel like I somehow have, like, we've been able to pick out even more nuances and, like, you know, I appreciate it even more somehow after this conversation. So
yeah, I feel like so many movies we talk about on this podcast, I appreciate them more after we talk about them.
Yes.
Which is so fun. I love that, like, you know, we love making this podcast for the people, but like it's so
mainly
fun
we do
for
it for
us too.
It's true. It's true.
For the ones of people who listen to this podcast, we love you.
We do love you.
Anyway, okay, so Geneva, can you go ahead and share with us what we will be talking about next week?
Yes. Oh, goodness. Next week, we are doing a movie that I'm very excited to do. We're kind of getting back to our unconventional Christmas movies. We are doing the 90s rom-com While You Were Sleeping, starring Sandra Bullock and Bill Pullman. Chicago classic, Tatum. So yeah, I'll have to see what you think.
I'm very intrigued to see how this goes because I've never seen this movie, and
your relationship with rom-coms is very up and down. So if you don't like it, that's okay.
I will be gentle if I don't like it.
Okay.
I promise.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Of course. All right, everybody. So thank you for listening this week, and we will talk to you guys all again in 2 weeks. Bye everybody.
Great job. Can you tell we're professional?
You have to say bye too.
I did.
Did you?
You waited so long.
Okay.
I couldn't tell if you were waiting for me.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening. If you want to get in touch with us, you can email us at yourpickpod@gmail.com. Our theme song was composed by Joel Rushton, and our podcast graphic was designed by Kara Shin. If you like this show and want to hear more, please rate and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. We're excited to have you on this journey with us. Until next time.